Modern Phase 3 clinical trials in cardiology, nephrology, and oncology require thousands of patients to be followed over years. As global standard of care improves, the absolute incidence of severe clinical outcomes, specifically mortality, continues to decline, making it statistically difficult to capture a measurable survival benefit without prohibitively massive patient cohorts. To solve this logistical barrier, trialists aggregate multiple distinct clinical outcomes into a single metric known as a composite endpoint. By bundling mortality, stroke, and minor hospitalizations together, researchers artificially increase the total number of observed events, boosting the statistical power of the trial. For decades, the standard methodology for analyzing these composite endpoints has been the time to first event framework, relying heavily on the Cox proportional hazards model to generate familiar Kaplan-Meier survival curves. This framework operates on strict mathematical egalitarianism. The model assigns the exact same statistical weight to a transient, non-fatal morbidity as it does to a fatal heart attack, provided they both fall within the composite envelope. The only distinguishing factor is chronological precedence. Because the analysis tracks the time to the very first event, it immediately stops tracking a patient's primary outcome data the moment any component of the composite occurs. All subsequent longitudinal clinical data is permanently discarded. By treating an early minor hospitalization as mathematically equivalent to a later death, the time to first event analysis creates a severe disconnect. A trial can achieve technical statistical success without providing any genuine clinical benefit to the patient. To see how the Cox model breaks down, let's compare two timelines. Patient A, in the control arm, has a minor hospitalization at day 30 and a fatal cardiac arrest 70 days later. Patient B on active treatment avoids hospitalization entirely, but suffers a fatal cardiac arrest at day 30. The analysis executes a strict cutoff at day 30. All subsequent data, including patient A's death, is erased. The mathematical output is paradoxical. The control patient is penalized exclusively for the early hospitalization. Meanwhile, the model records the active treatment patient's death at day 31 as a chronologically later event, scoring it as a better outcome. This dynamic introduces a severe survivorship bias. If an efficacious therapy successfully prevents early deaths, it leaves those patients alive longer to accumulate minor, non-fatal events. The model captures this increased volume of minor events and outputs a mathematically neutral or negative trial result. When a drug extends survival only to expose patients to late morbidities, standard composite endpoints completely fail to capture the true prioritized risk-benefit profile of the intervention. To analyze hierarchical composite endpoints without discarding vital data, Stuart Pocock and colleagues introduced the win ratio methodology in 2012. The win ratio discards aggregate survival curves entirely. Instead, it utilizes a non-parametric statistical mechanism called generalized pairwise comparisons. Modern trials use the unmatched approach, systematically pairing every single patient in the active arm with every patient in the control arm. This matrix scales aggressively. 1,000 active and 1,000 control patients generate exactly 1 million mutually exclusive pairs. This exhaustive patient-by-patient matrix ensures that the entirety of the longitudinal dataset is utilized, setting the stage for a strict hierarchical evaluation. Each unique pair undergoes a sequential duel. This flowchart interrogates the data against a pre-specified hierarchy. At Tier 1, it assesses mortality. Did the active patient outlive the control? If yes, the comparison terminates immediately with a definitive treatment win. If both patients survive the entire trial or drop out before a temporal difference is established, the algorithm declares a tie at Tier 1 and steps down to the next level. Tier 2 evaluates severe non-fatal morbidities. In modern variants, the algorithm counts the cumulative frequency of recurrent hospitalizations. If these hospitalization profiles are identical, meaning both patients had the exact same number of events, the algorithm declares another tie and descends again. Tier 3 shifts to continuous variables, evaluating changes in functional capacity, like a 6-minute walk test, or the degradation slope of a biomarker. To prevent a statistically trivial difference, such as a 1-meter advantage in walking distance, from generating millions of numerical wins, biostatisticians mandate pre-specified equivalence margins. If the difference falls within that margin, the pair results in a permanent tie. By anchoring mortality at the absolute apex of the hierarchy, the algorithm structurally blocks an intervention from accumulating deceptive wins through minor symptom improvements if that same drug causes premature death. The power of this hierarchy was demonstrated in the pivotal ATTR-ACT Phase 3 study, evaluating tafamidis for a highly fatal condition, transthyretin amyloid cardiomyopathy. Because the disease drives both rapid functional decline and high mortality, traditional time-to-first event models struggled to capture a holistic therapeutic benefit. Investigators relied on a hierarchical win ratio. The trial data revealed that tafamidis achieved a 30% reduction in absolute mortality, paired with a 32% reduction in cardiovascular hospitalizations. The step-down hierarchy isolated that 30% mortality benefit precisely at Tier 1. This mathematical lock-in proved that the subsequent drop in hospitalizations was a genuine therapeutic effect, rather than a spurious byproduct of control patients dying too early to be admitted. The win ratio analysis provided the mathematical proof that tafamidis was a true disease-modifying therapy, bridging the gap between statistical significance and actual patient survival. Cautionary. While the win ratio successfully solves the dilution problem of traditional models, it introduces complex mathematical vulnerabilities that require rigorous regulatory oversight. The primary test statistic, the unadjusted win ratio, is calculated simply by dividing the total number of treatment wins by the total number of control losses. This creates the ignoring ties fallacy. A matrix might yield 5% wins, 3% losses, and 92% permanent ties. Dividing 5 by 3 outputs a 1.66 win ratio. This suggests a massive advantage, completely obscuring the reality that 92% of pairs had identical outcomes. The model also suffers from structural bias caused by informative censoring. If a highly toxic experimental drug forces the sickest patients to drop out of the trial early, the algorithm cannot ascertain their final outcomes. It registers those missing endpoints as ties, rather than potential toxic deaths. To stabilize the S-demand and correct this bias, regulatory statisticians apply inverse probability of censoring weighting, or IPCW. IPCW identifies the specific demographic profiles of patients who dropped out and artificially inflates the statistical weight of similar patients who successfully completed the trial. This mimics a pseudo-population with zero administrative censoring. Without adjusting for the tied population and reweighting for toxic dropouts, an unadjusted win ratio can actively mask severe adverse events and exaggerate minor clinical differences. For clinical guidelines committees and health technology assessment agencies, relative odds are economically useless. They require absolute metrics to model cost-effectiveness and establish drug pricing. To translate the win ratio, health economists use the net benefit, or win difference. This metric abandons the ratio format entirely. It subtracts the absolute probability of a loss from the absolute probability of a win, physically pulling the tied population back into the denominator. Because the net benefit provides an absolute percentage of total clinical advantage, it easily translates into the number needed to treat, calculated simply as the inverse of the net benefit. By merging the structural clinical ethics of a ranked hierarchy with the absolute mathematical reality of the net benefit, the win ratio framework transforms abstract combinatorial algorithms into actionable patient-centric health policy.